Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, a couple of administrative items. First, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat feature, and we'll try to cover those before we close. Second, if any of you had joined us based on those incredible headshots from the advertisement, rest assured the webcams add a couple of pounds and maybe a few years. As we head into NADA, a lot of dealers are asking us bigger questions than how did I do last month? They're asking us, how do we build value that builds over time? Today's conversation discusses options available to dealers to shape long-term value. Questions dealers and their providers should be asking as they plan for this year and into the future. And ultimately, what you should be looking at to evaluate your business over that period of time. My name is Kevin Crayer, and I manage the Structure Solutions team here at JM&A. My role is to partner with our dealer customers who are participating in F&I contracts. Really, my job focuses after the sale of the contracts. We're looking at how we manage funds over the life of the contract, how contracts earn. We review claim activity, and ultimately talk things about retention and other reporting. With me today is Jamie Horowitz. Jamie?
Thanks, Kevin. My name's Jamie Horowitz, and I lead JM&A's Client Engagement and Analytics team. We spend a great deal of our time meeting with dealers and dealer groups, reviewing data, trends, and performance patterns across F&I claims and trying to make sense of the customer experience. My role is really to help dealers understand what the data is telling them, where the patterns are emerging, and how those insights can help support better decisions over time. Today, Kevin and I are going to walk through how dealership revenue is shaped over time, how we can earn revenue, how we can protect revenue, and how it can grow when it's in the right structure, and how the customer experience can stay aligned with the F&I process. And one of the big things we're seeing today is margin pressure, and that comes in the form not just the sale of the car, but because of affordability, we see it in all sides of the transaction.
Well, certainly margin pressure isn't new. Inflation has certainly made it louder. But the bigger issues are after those contracts are sale, revenue slipping away from the auto group itself. Customers leaving the network in terms of maybe having had a bad experience, and maybe the dealership not being able to support a contract to its full term. It's important for us in terms of how these contracts work with connecting a customer to the dealership.
So it's important customers staying connected. And the reason why that's so important is, and when you buy a service contract, the customer coming back, it supports the service drive, it helps lead to future purchases, and it also helps the dealer's reputation. That's why we really pay close attention and we use data to look at what's happening early in the vehicle ownership experience.
So, Jamie, in terms of looking at contract activity, we generally focus on early contract behavior. What should dealers be thinking about at the time of sale?
So what it really comes down to, it starts with selling the right product to the consumer. And what that really means is those products have to make sense, not just for the dealership, but also the consumer sees value in it. And then the good part about when products are being sold is there's a lot of data that gets generated right away. And it's important to understand what happens after the vehicles are delivered. What brings a customer back into the store, and where do those experience issues turn into a retention issue?
Is about participation, and what we're talking about is things like reinsurance. In terms of that, those contracts once they're sold, getting into a structure, having those dollars earned while they're in those structures, and ultimately having contracts, being able to take care of those customers all the way through to the full term of those contracts. Um,
So one of the things that we see specifically when dealers are in a participation structure is there's a lot of visibility to the data, the claims experience. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get actionable data from that. So one of the things we talk about is protecting that revenue once it goes into one of those participation structures. So we look at claims experience on the products that have been sold, whether it's a service contract or other products. We look at early claims, generally in the first 90 days. And these claims can point to issues with reconditioning and in the used car department, or it could mean that claims, it could also indicate that claims are being handled outside of the dealership and whether there's something that could be modified in the delivery process. So if a consumer has an early claim and then they go outside of the dealer network, that's a bad customer experience. That's a loss of revenue to fixed ops. It loses dollars in a dealer's participation structure, and it's a hit to the dealer's reputation. And I think we'll probably say this a lot. The biggest part is it's the loss of a future sale of another car. So when we talk about looking at the right products to sell, the right delivery process, what we're really trying to look at is how can we protect the revenue that's generated when you sell the car or your F&I products. How do we protect that long term and that customer experience? It's really important to look at the data that comes from your F&I products to identify the trends and
I,
use those to adjust processes and procedures and operations. Um, it's a real way that you can use data from F&I to help influence fixed operations as well.
You make all very good points. And in terms of continuing on with that relationship after that sale, when we're having ongoing conversations with our dealers and ultimately your provider should be having these conversations with you as well, is those trend reviews, looking at the data, seeing the cost impact of claims activity when they're taking place. It is focusing about having those dollars stay in the dealership and ultimately earning over time. All of these things are about patience and allowing these contracts to mature. So your process review is important, and having those ongoing regular conversations with our dealer customers um, has us stay focused on what's going on there.
So, we talked a little bit about how to protect the money, right? I'm curious, Kevin, you deal with structures all the time. What should dealers be thinking about when they're putting their F&I products in some form of revenue sharing product structure?
Well, I think structure alignment is one of those conversations that should be ongoing as well. Ultimately, we recognize that structure is not a set it and forget it solution. There's a time to chat now about where you're at currently and where you're looking at on a 3 to 5 year plan. Ultimately, uh, things change and they can change at a faster pace these days. But ultimately, dealers could be adding stores, and so is the structure adequate enough to pull in all that premium? Next, their dealers could be thinking about retirement, and ultimately having that as part of their 3 to 5 year plan. We're seeing it a lot now where the next generation is entering the dealership, learning the processes and learning about all of these activities. Are they going to be included in a structure? Maybe they need one of their own or being added to a different structure as well. And to be honest, cash flow changes, needs change as well. So there's an opportunity for dealers to pause putting dealer dollars into a structure and take more of a cash bonus program and make use of that structure into the future. Um, I think other things that we like to align with our dealers is understanding how contracts earn. Obviously these are single premium contracts that get sold. So you have sell a customer a contract really at the point of sale. Those dollars go into a structure, but they need to be available for some of our contracts, 7, 10, or even longer terms. And so those dollars need to be available. So investing is a big part of our conversations as well. So conservative at first, then as these contracts certainly earn over time, maybe being able to shift those investment strategies to something a little bit more risky. But everything is geared toward a long-term focus to making sure those dollars and are available for our customers.
So that really talks about, how to align your business operation to how your back end revenue is working. You kind of mentioned investing of the dollars. As you mentioned, the premium sits for years, and that gives you this investment opportunity. Is that a good way to make the premium work for a dealer?
Absolutely. In terms of having premium earn, and this is a volume business, so putting a significant amount of dollars out there And we refer to these as at-risk dollars because customers are out there expecting to have their vehicle serviced if, in fact, something needs to be fixed. But it is a large number of dollars that are available for dealers in these structures to invest. So we do encourage it. The money markets are one option, certainly very easy. But otherwise, we encourage a very conservative, usually something to the effect of an equity versus fixed income split, and let those contracts mature over time. Again, thinking through the life cycle of a contract, there are several years out there available customers with those contracts and be earning. So absolutely, investments should be a big part of conversations with our dealer customers.
So it's not just about generating the sale of an F&I product, it's about picking the right structure and then looking at your investments that align all those things together. And that's one of the reasons why our team was created, is to have these conversations and to layer on looking at that claims data, and allows us to focus on processes and technology and people to change behaviors in the operations. It's F&I products are long term. So when you sell an F&I product, things change over time in the dealership. It's important that you meet with your provider to talk about what is the data saying, so that you may be able to adjust your operations to continue to retain some of that revenue in your structure, and seeing what's controllable and what's not.
That's why I feel like, in terms of the partnership, we always refer to it as a partnership, and we have our field sales team, and people that can go into the dealership and train on activities and things that are going on. That helps align the sales team and the dealership, your service drive in a dealership, the ownership of the dealership, and allows us to educate on the reports that we provide, all the things you're talking about in terms of where those dollars are ultimately going, and if a claim takes place, ideally back to somewhere in the auto group itself, and ultimately keeping that customer connected. It's very impressive, the amount of data available through these processes, but ultimately the idea is, with a good partnership like a provider can bring for the dealer, you're always looking at growing those dollars, and having those at the end of each of those contracts.
So if you're coming to NADA, and some of our listeners may be, this is just a real snippet of some of the things that we are going to be talking about at the show. We're going to walk through how these ideas show up across the customer journey, from the sale of the contract to fixed ops, claims, and talent development within the store.
So at the show, the JM&A is going to have a booth. We're in booth 4313 or 4313 West, or W. And so if you are interested in having an additional conversation with a JM&A representative, there'll be a link in the comments associated with this webinar, or you can come meet the representatives over at the booth at NADA.
So Kevin, before we jump off, there's a couple things, I'll call them frequently asked questions, that come through. And one of the ones that I hear and see a lot is, what's the best structure for me?
It's a really great question. We talked earlier about the idea of dealers not having a set it and forget it structure. But when we have new relationships with dealers who are thinking about, the ideal situation is having a conversation up front to understand what's going on with our new dealer partner. Ultimately, the ownership is a factor. Are there many involved, or is it a single owner? How much premium is involved? How much risk a dealer is interested in taking on? And ultimately, we call ourselves structure agnostic. The idea is that we're trying to make sure we're aligning what the dealer's interests are, with the structures that are available. And so the marketplace has numerous available, simple reinsurance companies all the way through dealer-owned warranty companies. And I don't think that it makes sense to walk in and say, "Here's your structure, Mr. or Miss Dealer." So Jamie, in terms of thinking through claims activity, what are common things that we see reviewing claims data?
So I'm going to take a step back. Um, you know, part of what we talked about was we have these long at risk dollars, I think is how you called it. And each of the products that are sold, depending on the product type, they can go anywhere from 3 years out to 10, maybe some even to 11 or 12. So these at risk dollars sit for a while. So if you think about the most recent history of what's been going on macroeconomically, the first thing is to level set, hey, some of those at risk dollars have been impacted by things out of everyone's control. So if you think about, I sold a service contract in 2019, then COVID happened in 2020. And you would have thought your loss ratios would be low, but at the same time, there were supply chain disruptions that raised parts costs. This year, there might be tariffs or other inflationary impacts. Those are things that are out of our control. So looking at those and making sure that we talk to our client partners about that and say, here are the things that are happening in the market that could impact your business. So that's number one on for those at-risk dollars. But your question was about claims and what do we look at? You know, a lot of what we look at in the claims data is trying to catch behavior as it's happening. And that's to say, specifically on mechanical type products, you can go back and see what's happening. And I think a big thing for me is retention. So if a service contract has a 60% attachment rate, that's a really good sampling size of what's happening within a store. And on a used car, you're going to see that experience much quicker than on a new car. So one of the things we're really focusing in, and specifically because we see a lot of our partners have been ramping up their used car operations, is what's happening from a retention perspective. Are those claims coming back to their store or stores? If not, what is it that's creating that transaction outside of their dealer network? So, and we have seen a lot right now is I am conquesting cars to sell a new car. Some of those cars don't match the brand of the building I'm in, and those customers are leaving outside. Sometimes our dealer partners have that brand. Customer who bought the used car doesn't know. So that's something that we are looking at. And then we're also looking to see if that car is having the claim in the first 90 days. Because what that would indicate is there's a recon issue specifically on those off-brand makes. And to bring that attention to our partners so that they know that that's happening and things can be changed. It gives us an opportunity to talk about some best practices on how to retain a customer and just in general on the delivery of the car. So we look at some of that. That way, revenue is coming back to fixed operations. That money, that those claims going out of network, that's coming out of a reinsured structure. So now it's a double hit. You've lost the dollars of revenue in fixed ops. You've lost dollars from your reinsurance structure. We want to look at ways to help identify that early on to change behaviors in a store. And then the third is if it's happening early, and I mentioned this early on, is that those two things combined probably indicate that that's not a customer coming back for another car. So we try and identify that, and we see that a lot in claims data right now. I've sold a vehicle. We have a high propensity for early claims that are not coming back to my group, and therefore I've lost revenue several different ways. And those are things we're trying to isolate.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about the different things that should be asked by dealers, their providers, in terms of going through all these things. There's plenty of questions when it comes to structure and the opportunities for generating value over time. Again, each of these things involves time. We talk about structure being an element of patience is needed in terms of going through it. And as I look through, I see we have no more questions. So as we close out this session related to dealer value from F&I products, long-term dealership value is shaped by how you generate, how you protect, and how you grow what you sell over time.
So everything starts with the sale of a car, and then you can sell your F&I products to the consumer. And through that data, being able to understand what the signals are telling you, making sure your structure still fits and where your business is going and it's in line with your plans, and that you're actually got an investment plan to go along with those dollars, because that's a real opportunity to generate even more revenue for you. Just a quick reminder again, we'll be at NADA at booth 4313W. Please, if you're interested in content like what we're talking about today, there'll be a link to sign up to talk to us. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to talking to you at NADA. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Jamie.